All right. I'll go ahead and start with introductions. My name is Marilee Boylan, and I'm the Director of Employment Programs for the Strong Center for Developmental Disabilities, and I also happen to be the State Coordinator of Project Search in this role. And we also have with us Holly Opatic, and she's our liaison to Project Search National and the program specialist for Project Search. So,
hi, everybody. I see familiar faces. That's good.
So Holly has, some of you may have already seen this information if you were at the Project Search conference, but we're going to go through and do the state of Project Search like we always do in the fall. Let's see, let me switch to. Can you see the PowerPoint?
No.
Try again. Now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Oh, wait. This isn't the right one. Do you want me to share? Can you let me share my screen?
Yep.
Yeah, because I kind of pared it down. I thought I sent that to you. I'm sorry.
You probably did.
Let me get it. I just saw it. Did I just open it? Nope. Oh, here we go. And there. All right. Everybody seeing the screen now?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. All right, now I lose you, so I apologize about that. I can't see everybody now. But all right. Let me get it in the right mode. Oh dear. You would think we'd be better at this. Geez Louise. Why is it not doing? There we go. Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay, so as Marilee said, this is the information from our conference in Milwaukee. Just remember that the data that is shared is data that is on 9-month lag time. So this is data from 21-22 program year. And so we just want to remember that when we're thinking about it. So here are our co-founders. We were in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, so there was lots of cheese for anybody who was there. And we did have a little bit of fun over the weekend prior to the conference. These are all the program specialists. So obviously I'm your program specialist for the state of New York, but here are the rest of the lovely ladies that I get to work with, and hopefully you will be able to interact with at some time, whether that just be the conference or I'm going to tell you all, I almost ditched you all today because I had the opportunity to go see a house. And so you're going to get Carly, but then my realtor called and said, nope, we got to go tomorrow. I was like, okay, so sorry. All right. Here's our outcome data from 21-22. So our employment outcomes are looking pretty stellar. So again, remember, put your COVID hats back on. 21-22 was height, right? Height of COVID. And so 73% of folks were employed from that year. The average wage is $13.23. And the average hours is close to 25 hours. So that's really quite incredible. Remembering that our definition of competitive integrated employment for Project Search is at least 16 hours a week, that it's paying the prevailing wage. that the work is non-seasonal, and that it's occurring in an integrated setting. So our outcomes over the previous 5 years. So I'd just like to show this slide so that folks kind of get a idea of the number of people enrolled, but also, again, the placement for folks who are just in jobs in general, and then placement for individuals with that meet the project search criteria. So again, if you look, the enrollment was, it did increase. The number of people increased. The number of people completed has pretty much stayed the same over the last 5 years. So 92% of folks complete the program. We saw definitely a little bit of a jump from 1920 to 21-22. That definitely a difference with employment of all jobs. But then when we look at project search criteria, if you notice over those 5 years, there's consistently been a 10% gap, right? So the number of people employed in 17-18 was 73%, and the number that met criteria were 67%. And if you look at each one, it's about 10% every time, except 21-22. We're shrinking that gap, and we really love to see that, right? We want more and more of our individuals to meet that criteria. One of the things that we know from this research and from the information that you put in the portal is that there are oftentimes the number of people that statistic would be even smaller, but many people are working 14 or 15 hours a week. And when we hear about the 15 hours a week, we often hear, oh, it's 3 days a week and it's a 5-hour shift. And you think, oh my goodness, could we just not get one more hour, right? One more hour. So we're really trying to ask you guys that if that is the situation, if people are working 3 days a week and it ends up being 15, can you ask for that other hour? Can you encourage that individual to work that other hour? Just because it would make a world of difference. We would see a gigantic shrinkage of the difference between just employment and project search employment. So the bad news, though, is that 99% of our sites entered their data, but 23 programs found no jobs at all for their interns, or they just didn't put their data in. We don't know which one it is, right? But 23 sites accounts for 107 interns. And so if we took those 107 interns from the calculations, our employment would have been almost 76%, and 69% being employed in jobs that met oh my goodness, why can't I talk today? Criteria. So really putting in the data is really, really important. And, I think sometimes people struggle with it. I think sometimes people forget about it, right? It's just like that extra step. I was at a site in Ohio last week, and someone said, isn't there a better way? Like, we put this information in like 4 different systems. And I totally get it. I understand that. But again, from our perspective, this is the only way we can really collect our data as well as support you. So if you're not putting the data in, we really, really encourage you to do that. And, if you are one of these sites, so, if you're from one of, if you are one of the people that didn't put any data in last year, please reach out to me. Certainly I can figure out a way to help you. If you didn't get interns employed, that would be something too that we could, talk about technical assistance and brainstorm ideas. I know that I'm in Pittsburgh, but look, we can do this very easily. We can have great conversations over Zoom. I think that one thing that came from the pandemic is that we are more accessible, and that folks are, use Zoom and Teams and all that a lot more than before COVID, right? And so we hear more and more from a lot of our teams like, like you guys weren't so involved before. And it was like, well, it wasn't that we didn't want to be involved, but over 700 sites and 7 people, that there's not a lot of us to go around. But when we're able to have these types of face-to-face interactions via Zoom, it makes things so much easier, and we are definitely more accessible. The good news is that almost 82% of programs had 50% employment or higher, so that's definitely good. That 57 or 55% of all programs had 70% or higher, so that's pretty good as well. And that 40% of programs had 80% or higher. So again, these are kind of those straggler employment programs, but they still make up a good chunk of the programs that are out there. Our class sizes, so the average class size is about 6. Again, we see that dwindling, and we know that for a number of people, recruitment continues to be a struggle. I think that we've talked about it over and over again, and I know that people really don't want to kind of concentrate on COVID or blame it on COVID. However, we lost a lot during COVID. We lost a lot of time. We lost a lot of opportunities. The sheer number of turnover from either a CRP perspective or a government agency perspective or school district perspective is astounding in some places, right? And that people are still kind of churning, right? There's a lot of job opportunities and people are having a hard time hiring in certain sectors. And so we know that this is an issue. And again, we're encouraging our sites to just kind of get out there and re-educate people about project search. I think people keep going to the same well in a way, and although that might be the right well, those people might not be there. So those who knew about project search or understood it or had a formal presentation about it just might not be there anymore. And so, kind of really hitting it hard and getting the word out there, I think, is our next best option. Again, when we look at the distribution of class sizes, we see that 7, 6, and 7 are most, and there are those outliers that have a little bit more. However, these programs that are at like 1, 2, and 3, 3, the fact that there's 26 at 3 is a little concerning to us, because one thing is that the statistics show us that actually the smaller the class size, the worse the outcomes are. Which again, you would think it would be the opposite. You would think if you had 3 or 4, you would have more time and more opportunity and more energy to find job opportunities and job search for those individuals. However, the class sizes that are larger have better employment outcomes. I don't know why that is, but that's definitely something that we see across the board. And I think recently we were talking about it in a meeting, and someone said, I think a little bit of it is that those cohorts are small and there isn't as much like interaction, right? So there's not as much interaction with the business. There's not as much interaction with each other. Those larger groups kind of make a bigger impact. There's a bigger splash. They interact with each other a lot more. They learn and kind of feed off of each other. When it's a smaller little thing, it's more insulated. It's not making the same impact. And so that makes a lot of sense to me. But again, just something to think about as well. So the hours and pay, again, you can see that that's steadily increasing, and that's going along with what we're seeing across the United States just in general. Those average hours worked being close to 25 is really great. We love to see that as well. Hiring by the host business. So this is definitely an improvement that we've seen as well. In previous years, about 30% of the host business hired individuals. It was up to 41% this year. So we're definitely seeing that they see the need, and that they're seeing project search as a pipeline, which is excellent, right? That's what we want to see. And so we just want to keep that momentum going and showing and proving that our individuals can fulfill the jobs that are available in host businesses. So this is the top 21 types of jobs. Aaron always says, why 21? Because it fits on the slide. And that's truly the reason. There isn't anything really other than that. But you see that housekeeping and custodial and food preparation are still the top. And we see that an awful lot. However, stocking and materials management has moved up to number 3 this year, which is a good thing. And we are seeing more and more programs open in warehousing opportunities. So that can be part of that reason. However, this next slide shows you that the top 10 project search jobs are also captured in the top 10 jobs in the United States. So I think sometimes we know that when it comes to people with disabilities, they're often pigeonholed into, 60% of folks with disabilities do work in housekeeping or food services. And, the statement has been, there isn't typically 60% of a population that works in those industries. However, if we look again at what's happening in the United States, our jobs are matching up. So we aren't necessarily just steering people to those types of jobs. The other thing is that when most of our project searches happen in hospitality and healthcare, these are the top hiring categories in both those sectors as well. So it does make a lot of sense when you look at that kind of data in the background. All right, our curriculum updates. So as you know, over COVID, 25 teachers got together and created the Project Search Employability Skills curriculum. They went through each one that existed before, revised it, created this new lesson plan format, and there was a lot of feedback. And so again, one thing about Project Search is we take the feedback and we make adjustments. And so they've been working over the past 6 months to streamline the format, because one of the things was that it was very cumbersome. And in particular for adult programs who may not have a special education teacher as the instructor, it was a little overwhelming, right? So they took out a lot of stuff. They took out the safe space. They took out the reflection. They realigned things. So they put the glossary of terms into the activity section. The PowerPoints won't be attached to the lesson. They are going to be in a separate folder in the employability skills curriculum. They did rename handouts to match, so that is going to cause easier use. And you're going to be able to download them by units instead of just lesson by lesson by lesson. Being able to go in there and look at it is a nice thing, but, downloading one at a time, that can be cumbersome. I was on a session with Susie on Monday, and she says that they are close. It's the editing that's really holding them up, because some things are really tedious and they want to make sure that the links and all those things work correctly. And so hopefully before Thanksgiving, this will be released in the member portal. You will notice too, if you've been in the member portal, that now curriculum has its own Monopoly card. So it is teal now there. So that they're getting ready, they're starting to move things over behind the scenes, and hopefully that full launch will be there before Thanksgiving. So this is kind of just a little example of what it has changed to look like. So again, you could see it's definitely, this is the front page. You're going to see it right from the get-go. Lessons for Living, Learning, and Working is the pre-project search curriculum. So if you haven't heard about that, that was released last spring. Again, the 25 teachers that created the curriculum got together and created this as a gift to Project Search. The thought behind this was that what do folks need to come into Project Search? What are the things that maybe a lot of instructors spend time on that could happen prior to coming into Project Search? And so this is a gift. It's free. It's free to anybody. So you could share it with any of your partners. You can share it with local school districts, whomever you'd like to share it with, you can. The only thing is they just have to download a questionnaire. And so that QR code that's on the screen actually works. You just scan the QR code. It'll take you to this little questionnaire, and then you get the curriculum. So completely free. And that those can be downloaded and combined into those lesson plans as well. So once you have it, you can download them individually.
Hey, Holly, I just wanted to reiterate that, please send it to anybody. I don't care who they're affiliated with. Like, if this is going to help a school to improve their transition practices or to help folks get more skilled vocationally, just, let it go. Like, just
right. Share it out.
It's just a wonderful resource, and
absolutely. I think that a lot of it is practical knowledge, right? And personally, I'm going to say from a school district's perspective, it is things that maybe they don't concentrate on as much as they should, right? So again, we all know from a Project Search perspective what it's like to be in a business, and some of the things that aren't addressed early on are things that these lessons cover, right? And so we really would encourage you to give it out to school districts, or if you have other programming within your community rehab provider, do they have transition programs? Do they have work readiness? So it doesn't even have to be for high school students. It could be for folks who have graduated but are in work readiness training. This is a great tool for that as well. So here are the lessons. So there are 8 units. And it just addresses daily living skills, functional literacy, functional math, the job search process, self-advocacy, social and communication skills, a lot of the soft skills, and some technology. So again, even within maybe your own programs that you run, maybe you don't have something that covers some of this and you want to use it. We've heard of some folks who kind of used it as a boot camp for their Project Search interns. So in between the time that they were accepted and the program started, they had them come to program and they went through some of these lessons, which that's a pretty good idea, in my opinion. That's a great idea, actually. Just a way to kind of ease them into what Project Search might be requesting of them. So we have the CPR game. I don't know if everybody knows this, but Erin Riley, the director of Project Search, co-creator of Project Search, was originally a emergency room director at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. And she's also our director of disability services at Cincinnati Children's. And so Project Search is only one of the departments that she oversees. The other department is our vocational rehabilitation partner. And those individuals, that department, the 3 women that work there, they are there to support employees with disabilities within Cincinnati Children's Hospital. So their whole job is to basically help individuals, the 80 individuals that are hired at Cincinnati Children's, to maintain and retain their job. And their goal is always, and a lot of their time is often spent in individuals fulfilling their mandatory requirements. And for many of them, CPR is a mandatory requirement. And it was hard, it was difficult, and they were trying all different types of things. And so Erin sat down with somebody and they started kind of brainstorming some ideas, and poof, like not poof. I mean, it was over a couple of years, but this CPR game came about from kind of her knowledge and those job coaches' knowledge, and working with the American Red Cross. So This is available for purchase from the Attainment Company. I do have flyers, or I can send anybody the link if you are interested. But it does really improve the ability for individuals to pass regular CPR. So not friends and families, but the required CPR of healthcare professionals. The other thing that really kind of spurned this, and I don't know if a lot of people know this, but there was a Project Search intern who had graduated the program, but for some reason she's not a Cincinnati Children's employee, but for some reason people still kept in contact with her. And she was at a party over the summer that was at a lake, and one of her young cousins fell into the lake and was dragged from the lake and wasn't breathing when she was dragged out. She was 4 years old. So this intern, the graduate, knew CPR from her time in Project Search, started CPR and saved her young cousin's life. And so that, yeah, Kristen, yeah. So that really kind of was the impetus, like, you know what, we got to do this, right? We know that folks can learn it. We know that they can help save people's lives too. And so we need to do that. And again, if anybody who knows Erin personally, once she knows something needs to be done, it's going to get done. And so we're really proud that we have this to share with everybody. All right, so steering committee meetings and steering committees. We've heard more and more from sites that this is one of those practices that's kind of got off the rails. Particularly, again, we think, during COVID, because things were so iffy and it was a stop and start, and some people were working, some people weren't working, all of those types of things. But kind of the reboot of steering committees has been difficult for a lot of folks. So what we just want to make sure everybody understands is that the reason for steering committees is to provide direction and planning for the Project Search program. So the role of that steering committee is to bring all the decision makers of your partners together to make decisions, either operational or strategic, about the program itself. It's not about the day-to-day, right? The day-to-day is covered by your instructor, your business liaison, your skills trainers. It's about more of the big picture pieces of the program. And certainly it is not a debriefing of each intern. So that's the one thing that a lot of steering committees have kind of morphed into, is a line by line of each intern. And again, I get it. If I was a decision maker, if I was a director at a CRP or somebody in OPWDD or the hospital or a host business, and I'm just getting a rundown of the people who are in the program, I'm going to think, why am I going to that meeting? They don't need me, right? So we need to make sure that everybody understands that they have a role and they have something to contribute when they're coming to these meetings. So like I said, we want to address those big picture items. Maybe we have to relook at the partnerships. Project Search is all about collaboration. And if we haven't done anything to kind of nurture that relationship, especially over these last couple of years, maybe we need to do something to do that. So maybe your next couple of steering committee meetings are about reconnecting with one another. Maybe it's a little bit of more of a social time and kind of gathering and talking with one another, and then talking about Project Search, but reestablishing those connections. Certainly something that should be addressed almost every meeting is marketing. What are your flyers look like? Where are you advertising things? Are you having tables? Who all is doing that? Again, it can't always be up to the instructor and the skills trainer. It has to be about those other partners and what they can bring to the table. That's also with recruitment as well. So are all your partners recruiting for you? How are they recruiting for you? Do you have a united voice? Do you know what you should be saying at those recruiting events or at meetings that you're at? looking at expanding those internships, right? So are they kind of going through maybe the internships and saying, are these transferable and marketable skills for our area? Does this really lead to employment for our interns? Making sure that employment meets model fidelity. And then I think that data entry. So this is a good time. Steering committees is a good time. You know, maybe every other meeting you go into the member portal and you take a look. Is everything right? Do we have all the information? Why don't we have our interns in the portal just yet? Why don't we have first internships in the portal just yet? I have a couple of programs that don't have that. Like, I'm going to be calling them pretty soon to say, where are your interns? You should have them in there right now. Set a goal, right? So every program year, usually most steering committees meet in October for the first time after programs start. And so, you know, what's your goal for this year? What do we want to do? I've heard of teams who say, hey, like that very first meeting, what do you think we did really well last year? Okay. Do we all agree that we're pretty solid on that? We don't have to talk about that for this year. What do we need to improve on? What didn't we do so well last year? And how can we make that better? And maybe that's that goal, right? So it doesn't need to be something big and drawn out and a huge strategic plan or anything, but maybe just those simple questions. What do we need to improve on? And how do we kind of use that thread throughout the year?
Hey, Helen, can I mention something really quick?
Yeah.
So in the document library, there's a great self-assessment tool, program self-assessment tool, and there's a couple different papers, but one is kind of going over the instructions. The other one is kind of like a checkoff sheet. And those make really good conversation for the steering committee meetings, because you find like, okay, we're following these model fidelity factors, but we're missing these, you know, and how are we going to create a kind of like a strategic plan? How are we going to create strategy to add those into our program? And
absolutely,
though these people, the steering committee folks, are the folks that can help you with that.
For sure. It's very interesting because I had a program in Pennsylvania that said, oh my gosh, our steering committee meetings are like 20 minutes, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, 20 minutes? Like, what do you accomplish in 20 minutes? Right. And so, you know, I worked with them and I said, there's an agenda in the member portal, maybe use that agenda, you know, create those items. And then she said, okay, well, maybe we got to 30 minutes. And so then I suggested to them, why don't you go through the tool? Go through one model fidelity item every meeting and, you know, talk about it. And they sent me back the tool and it was blank. And I stupidly said, I think you sent me the wrong document. There was nothing on it. And she said, oh no, we covered it all, but we're doing it. And, you know, the very first thing in the model fidelity is that that our program has 70 to 100% employment. And so they were like, yeah, well, we're at 70. And I said, so the discussion could be, how do we get to 100? So yeah, you check the box, you're meeting the 70, but what else can we do? You know, can we make a goal of it being 80 next year? Can we make it be a goal of 100 next year? So I absolutely agree with you, Mary Lee, going through or, you know, maybe again, choosing a fidelity component to focus on for the year is a great idea. So longstanding programs probably can meet less often. However, I think this time of year, October, November are good times to have steering committees. December, January, maybe not, but February, March, absolutely, once again. And then you have April and May. So those are kind of good times to meet. So you might not meet 12 consecutive months or 9 consecutive months, but you want to be thoughtful on when you are meeting. And remember, these are decision makers from your partner organizations, right? And it should include that on-site team as well. And that all those folks should be participating in all the activities that you're doing. So right now, You're probably hosting information nights, or you're probably putting out your applications. Have you run those through your steering committee? Are your steering committee members coming to those events? Can they talk about the services that they're going to provide to interns in the program? So there's definitely things to be done at each kind of point during the year. And so think about that. Think about, again, maybe that's one of the questions you have. When should we meet? What's enough time to meet? And you know, maybe you do meet 45 minutes and it's every month. But make sure there's an agenda for sure that you're covering, and that goes out to everybody so they know what the meeting is. I think always increasing that employment outcomes is really, really a good idea. Like, how do we get there? If we're not at 100, how do we get there? What are the other things that we can be doing? Already talked about the agenda. This is where you find it, right? So in our toolkit, in the essential documents, there is the steering committee agenda. Again, if you don't like the way that it looks, you can reformat it. There's nothing that says you can't. But, you know, at least take the pieces out so that you know what to concentrate on.
Hey,
This is
Holly,
what it looks like.
there was a question
Oh.
in chat, and they were asking if they could have a copy of the PowerPoint.
Yeah. I can't send you the PowerPoint. I can only send you a PDF. Sorry.
Fine.
So, you know, you can see here, you know, what's the purpose of the meeting? What's your objective of the meeting? Who's going to lead what topics? How many minutes is allotted for each time? You know, what are those next steps? What do you got to keep doing? So you know, I would say classic agenda kind of items and things to do, but it definitely keeps you focused, and kind of on track. So recruitment and selection. Again, I mentioned that we know that recruitment, that the average numbers for programs has been lessening. We really need and are strongly encouraging a lot programs to be honest with one another. So again, a topic of the steering committee should be, what's your number? What's your sustainable number? What's the magic number for the program, right? So every program is different, and every way that they're funded, I think even across New York, I think everybody does things a little bit differently. So there isn't a number that Project Search can give you, right? But, you know, most programs that are high school programs are coming out of a BOCES in New York. And so it's either 1 to 6, 1 to 8, or 1 to 12. So that's pretty clear cut from the education perspective. And then from the CRP's perspective, the folks who are providing the skills trainers,
thank you for calling
okay,
Frontline
if it's
Education
1 to 6, 1 to 8, 1 to 12, what's sustainable for you?
New York Medicaid
Right?
or
So
Medicaid Toolkit 2, IEP, ESA, and all other support.
somebody's not
Free.
muted.
Thank you
Sorry.
for calling Frontline.
Yeah, working to find them.
Okay. Sorry. Oops. So, you know, what is that number? 1 to 6, 1 to 8, 1 to 12 for a CRP. Can you support that? Can you provide 1, 2, 3 skills trainers? And if you is your funding going to support that as well? Right? And are you getting follow along dollars? Are you getting supported employment dollars that help support that program? And you have to be honest about that with one another. I don't think Steve is on this call, but Steve Tyler was excellent in a meeting a couple weeks ago. We were meeting with a host business, and the hospital kept saying 6 interns, 6 interns, 6 interns. And he said 8. Every time they said 6, he said 8. And, you know, and he said, well, I think, you know, that 8 is small, you know, 12 is a full class, and, you know, 8 is a great number. And, after we got off the call, I said to him, Steve, I'm so proud of you. That was wonderful for you to say 8, 8, 8. So to let them know 8 is your number. And he said, well, you know, Holly, you know what happens? You know, 8 becomes 6, you know, before we even get to Project Search. And then 6 becomes 4 during the year. So now I'm at 4, and 4 is my bottom number that I can be sustainable at. And I absolutely, I totally agree with you, Steve. So we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to be honest, with our partners, and nobody wants Project Search to put a program in the red, right? Or an agency in the red. Project Search isn't necessarily going to make anybody money, that's for sure, but we don't need people who can't afford to pay their skills trainers or things like that. That's not the point of Project Search.
Hey, Holly, I remember some folks talking about having a waiting list. So kind of
Yep.
thinking about how attrition will probably happen, and they were kind of planning on it, and they kept a waiting list and let people know if they had attrition that they may get called to the program during the year.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. I think if you can figure that out and figure out how that can work for you, obviously, again, how do we even stop attrition from happening? I mean, that's the other thing too. So thinking about, like I said, usually you're accepting people into the program somewhere around April, May. Folks don't start until August, September. What are you doing on the in-between? How are you keeping them engaged? How do they want to come to Project Search, right? What makes them really be excited about the program? And so those are some things to think about for sure. I think that, if you're not sustaining those numbers, so Marilee and I just learned about a program this week that's on hiatus from New York, because they couldn't recruit enough folks. What are your options? So yes, there is an option of being on hiatus. And so a program can go on hiatus and take a pause. That just means you're not paying a license fee for the year. And, we're still going to ask you to be kind of active and making sure you're looking at your previous graduates and adding their information to the database, but nothing else. But we also are going to help you at that point. If you're on hiatus, do you need a different host business? What are your recruitment strategies? What are the things that have been barriers, or why do you think you haven't been able to recruit? But also, what can you do as a placeholder, right? So oftentimes people kind of limp along because they don't want to lose their host business. They're happy with the host business. They're, excited that they were able to get in there. They don't want to lose that relationship. And so, being creative. Can your program accept seniors? Is that something that's an option for you? And not seniors meaning the elderly, but seniors like that are still in school. Could you use the pre-Project Search curriculum? So could you run a program that has some pieces of that curriculum, maybe in a training room, and then does some job shadowing or experiences, or again, it's just acclimating people to the work environment by utilizing the space that once was Project Search. I already talked about summer engagement. Or can you include other partners, right? So are you able to pull from different counties? Are you able to pull from different school districts? Can you backfill with adults? So if you are a high school program and you have low numbers, are you able to become a hybrid program and backfill those seats that aren't filled with adults? Those are all options, and those are things that I'm happy to talk offline with anybody if you have questions about that as well.
And I'm sure that would be a good conversation topic at the steering committee meeting if you have the adult folks, whether it's OPWDD and the adult agency, to just talk it through.
For sure. All right. So employment planning meetings, this is another thing that we've seen have kind of taken a hit and aren't really kind of operating under model fidelity standards. Remember that we have employment planning meetings so that we can keep up to date on people's progress. We want to identify the different barriers that folks are facing, and really 6 meetings is not a lot of time to get everybody on page and to help everybody understand what the end goal of Project Search is, right? So we need to think about that and also be strategic on how we utilize those meetings. And if we can kind of combine meetings, I think some of the things with employment planning meetings is well, why are we having this meeting and then we have a supports coordinator meeting with OPWDD, or we have another VR meeting or something like that? Can that all be combined? Like, can't that information be shared at the same table? Like, think about those things, right? And, you know, again, you don't want to be on a path with somebody else and something else being planned for that individual separately. So it is really about bringing everybody together at the same table, helping everybody understand what project search is, what's the goal of project search for that intern, and how and what supports are available to that intern as they move through the program and then afterwards. So we know that most of the time interns are leading their meetings. So maybe that first or second meeting, they're not doing it. By the third meeting, for sure, they should be leading their meeting, sharing their information. We have PowerPoints that are in the member portal to help design that. Again, it gives empowerment to the interns. It definitely gives them a lot of great practice of presenting in front of individuals as well. If we can go back to in-person meetings, that's really being encouraged. Zoom became impact, right? And so, you know, for the interns to be able to present to the room, to their families, to whomever, it's really impactful.
Hey, Hallie, I just want to say that whether the student's running their own IEP or the team meetings, it changes the dynamic. Like,
oh, for sure.
You know, it creates so much like life and exuberance, and they could do some of the prep during the class time. But it really, I think it really gets people excited, and it's just kind of thrilling to have them run their own meetings. It just creates
100%. I think so many times it's one of the selling points of getting these folks here, right? Because they're like you said, they're excited to hear what their intern is going to say, what's going on. I agree with you. I mean, most people don't want to come to an IEP meeting. Most people don't want to come to like a supports coordination meeting because they're not fun. Right? I mean, at least this has a fun kind of feel to it. It's uplifting, right? We're talking about improvement and progress and things that people like. I mean, there are hard questions and there's definitely things to conquer as well, but also too, I think it again breeds that camaraderie. It gives a nice way for folks to understand the collaboration and also that transition. So who's going to be helping folks once project search is over, and what are those supports there? And it helps those people who are going to be providing those supports understand that individual in a much more thorough way, I think, than again meeting in the Panero with mom, right? So these are all the folks that should be involved in those employment planning meetings. Internship managers and business liaisons, we hear over and over again, that's hard. We know that that's hard. But even if you could just get a video clip of them saying, hey, this person did a really great job. I love that they did X, Y, and Z. And, these are the things I think they should improve on for employment. That's powerful, right? We know that managers and mentors are very busy. But also too, your business liaison could also be that messenger, right? So they could be the person who's kind of providing the business aspect of for the meeting, for the parents and for the individual. I also think that if you have somebody from the business there, that really strengthens again the relationship. And I think it changes the dynamics too a little bit too, where that intern feels really important and they feel supported by the host business as well. All right, so meetings are held 2 times during the internships or monthly. That's your choice. So most of the time it ends up being every 4 weeks anyway. So having it every month, what's the difference, right? It's a little easier to schedule when it's every month too. We definitely should consider what the schedule of the family is. We definitely need to consider, if you are a high school program, what are, who from the high school has to attend and their schedules. So, you have to think about these things. It's not something that can be scheduled on the fly. They really should be thought about ahead of time, probably scheduled during the summer, and that they're scheduled regularly so that people know when they're coming. We have examples of calendars that we give out typically, and like they're already in the calendar. So they're scheduled way ahead of time so that people know, okay, the third week or the third Tuesday of every month is my employment planning meeting, and it's at 9 o'clock. And I know that I have to be there. So I think, again, it helps maximize employment when things are scheduled out, or not employment, maximize attendance. So what are the things that should be discussed at those employment planning meetings? Their internship evaluations, the voc fit reports showing the job matches or the internship matches or their progress. Are those good reports to share at that meeting? Any kind of information about their job aids or successful job accommodations that have been taking place. And then walking through the employment plan. So Project Search also has an employment plan in the toolkit. It is set up for 6 employment planning meetings, and it really just outlines what are the desires of that individual. We know that those things are going to change, and that's one of the reasons why the document's kind of already set up, because we know what the employment goal is at meeting number 1 and what the employment goal is at meeting number 3 could definitely change, right? And we almost encourage that, because we know that folks are going to have different experiences and they're going to change their minds. And also that the information they're going to learn about themselves, and then the on-site team is going to learn about that intern, is going to help structure that. So these are the things that definitely should be on the agenda for the employment planning meetings. Again, 20 minutes isn't enough to discuss all of this, right? This is usually, I would say, a half hour to 45-minute meeting, sometimes even an hour, depending on the intern and the things that have to be discussed. Things that maybe the intern wants to talk about. So that's the other part, is that, help that intern create that agenda. Give them a little bit of time on the agenda. Maybe the first 15 minutes are for them to talk about things that they want to talk about. What are their employment interests? Especially if those interests are different than their family expectations, right? Give them kind of the safe space and the support to have those discussions. Any kind of work-related social activities or things that are going to help them, meet the needs of those next steps. Any kind of independent living desires, do they want to move out or drive or do any of those things? And how can we help support that? Even maybe the topic of like home homework, I want to do this at home. I want to, whatever it is, just being able to give them a voice at the table. So certainly them leading the meeting gives information, but I let them say, hey, these are the things I really want to talk about. And they have support, to talk about it with their family or whoever's helping them make those decisions, because they have the other people around the table to support them. So these are kind of some of the topics. So if you think about the meetings, the first meeting really sets up the expectations of the program, and maybe identifies those barriers to employment. So what are the things that we know we're facing as we're moving through this year? Employment planning meeting number 2, maybe you give out an employment questionnaire and you ask them to bring that back at that meeting. And that questionnaire might ask them things like, the hours that they want to work, the days they want to work, will they work weekends and nights, and all the things that make up a job, right? Where do they want to work? What's the community they want to work in? If your host business has more than one site, are they willing to work at those other sites? Does that match with where they live? Can they get to those types of sites? What kind of transportation are they going to be taking? So that questionnaire might be given out maybe at that first meeting, and you ask them to bring it back at that second, and you review it. And so, it says, yes, I want to work at the hospital, but no, I don't want to work weekends. Well, that doesn't work, right? Most of the people who are working in that hospitals operate 365, 24 hours a day. You're probably going to have to work on the weekends, right? Or I'm like looking at Emily, the mall doesn't close on the weekends, right? So things about to talk about to kind of flush out during that meeting on top of the other presentation and things that your intern is going to talk about. Number 3, what are your employment goals? Have they changed? Again, are we narrowing them? Are we widening them? What does that look like? And then any areas of improvement. So we've done a really good job so far. What else do we have to add to our toolbox to become employable? How do we get there? What do we need to do? What kind of support might we need from other people around the table? 4, 5, and 6. Number 4, you kind of review internship. Number 2, again, revisiting those barriers to employment. Have we conquered them all? If we haven't, what are we doing about it? If by this time we haven't had benefits counseling, maybe this is definitely a time to really think about that and help them understand what types of jobs, what's the wage, all of those things that can become barriers for the family. Number 5, definitely should be focusing in on that job search. What's it look like? What's the expectations? How many jobs might we be applying for? What are your interview expectations? What's that going to look like? How are you going to get to an interview? Who sets up those interviews? All of the above, like anything you can think of when it comes to preparing for employment. And then number 6, what are the next steps? So for any intern that doesn't have a job offer or anything on the horizon, what's that going to look like? When project search ends, who are they going to meet with? How often are they going to meet with that person? What is their job search going to look like, and how is that going to continue? So you can see just from those examples I gave you, there's a lot to talk about in a meeting. So I don't know how people do it in 20 minutes. And again, I think when people were being asked to come to a meeting for 20 minutes, why would I do that, right? But there's certainly a lot to talk about, and it certainly can be more than 20 minutes. Yeah, that person the intern going through their presentation, that might take 10 to 15 minutes, but there's a lot of other things to discuss in an employment planning meeting. Here's that employment plan. So this is what it looks like, the document. As you can see, there's some, it talks about who's at the meeting, when did you do the voc fit, what is the internship, what's the preferred work environment. Now, again, all of this is editable. So if you don't want to have this information on this document, you can change it. That's okay. But we really would encourage you to have a document that follows the intern as they're moving through the program. So the longitudinal data. So getting the job is just the beginning. And all the data that we just shared with you in the beginning is valid and is important, and we absolutely want that information. But we know, and what we want to know is more about those interns. So that intern got that first job, walked out the door of project search with a job. Are they still in that job today? Did they get a raise? Did they increase their hours? Did they change jobs? Did they get a promotion? All of those things we want to know, and you're able to capture that in the member portal. So we really would love, we know we have a role assigned to it, so that graduate data entry person, they should be going back through year after year after year, maybe updating it every 6 months, taking a look, seeing if they can gather more data. Again, for our purposes, research, we don't have that. We just don't have enough information in the member portal to provide good research or get the grants or the money to do a little deeper dive into that. So we're really encouraging that folks go back through those years and do that, especially if your host business is hired. you have access to those people. You have access to people who could tell you that information. You can, ask HR and ask that person, is it okay if this information is shared with us? Going back to supports coordinators or going back to VR, any of the people who might be working with those individuals to gather that data. That's what we want to see happen. So this is the information I'm talking about. So you can see here that this program, that March of this year was the last time they updated their graduate program year for 21-22. Prior to that, they haven't done anything for these years since 2022. So we're almost a year that they haven't touched this data. So can they go back in there and see, do we know anything about those individuals? Can we update it? Maybe there is no change, and that's okay. That still is information that's valuable to us. And again, we're not asking you to do it, it's not a requirement. It's, we just are asking you to try, right? We know that these are the challenges and that oftentimes people are lost to follow up. They change agencies. They don't go with the same provider. That staff turns over. And so, there might not be somebody who knows these people, and to cold call people could be uncomfortable. I don't know, New York may prohibit long-term tracking. I'm not sure. But, we just want to be able to kind of collect as much information as we can, so that we still are validating our statistics, right? It's something to say that we have 78% of our graduates who are employed, but it's also something to say that those same 78 are employed a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, right? That just adds validity to the program. So again, all we ask is that you try. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just think about it. Just think about what your options is. Another good conversation for steering committee. Who on the committee can do this? Or who's connected to people who could provide this information? Just something to consider and think about. All right. And then lastly, here we go. Drum roll, save the date. I want to see you in Albuquerque. So July 15th through July 19th, we will be in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I just bought some fun party pants this weekend.
And it'd be really great to get either folks from OPWDD, Access VR. So if, when you talk to your partners, see if they're willing to go. See if they'd be willing to connect with other folks that are at the conference. I think that could be really powerful. How's everybody doing?
I know that's a lot of information. It's pretty fast too. But that's the overview. That's the kind of highlights that were concentrated on at the conference this year at the Wednesday address for those who have been there before.
Thank you very much for doing that. That's super helpful to kind of get the big picture and then see where we can help do some modifications. I wanted to share with you guys too, kind of where New York is in the data set. Let me see if I can bring up that. They close that PowerPoint? No, hold on. I think I attached it to the end of this. Okay. Can everybody see that? Okay. So the other part of this is, so where is New York in our program outcomes? So year after year, we're growing. So we had 19 programs in 2021, 21 programs in 21 and 22, and then 24 programs in 22 and 23. So we're growing. That's great.
And we have,
Pardon?
I was going to say, and we have 6, 7. We have 8 people at least, or at least 8 sites that are interested in starting in the next 2 years.
And that's crazy. That's great. And then, where are we? So as Holly was saying, that 73% of our graduates nationally on average are getting jobs, not in the project search category, but just employed in general. And then as we're looking at our outcomes in the state of New York, we're about 53%. So we're trailing a little bit, and we're working on getting up to having the same outcomes as national across the nation. So, but over time, where are we headed? So let me show you that. Get rid of this. Okay. So we're gonna start with the bottom bar graphs. So the number of students that have enrolled has increased over time. So we've increased 39 students from 20 to 23. And it's a little confusing with a different color. So I used as much data as I could to show the differences. When we get up to the number employed, I don't have the data yet for that information. So I was able to add another year into this one. The number of students completed, they increased 35 students from 2020 to 2023. The number of students that were employed has increased 15 students from 20 to 22. And the percentage of students employed has increased 4% between 2020 and 2022. The number of students employed with project search criteria between 2020 and 2022 increased by 10 students. And the percentage of students employed with project search criteria between 2020 and 2022 is pretty much, it was increased by 1%. So that kind of gives you an idea where we are. Do you guys have some ideas of just some areas where we can push on that percentage and move us from the 53 to more towards that 73%? What do you think could help us get there? What are some of the things that are hangups that are from getting a job during the year for you guys? Oops. We're a small group. We're 20. We can talk.
Transportation.
Transportation.
I was just going to say, I'm new. Yep. I'm new, but transportation has been a big piece to that in terms of getting them employed.
And is it getting the training to do the transportation, or just transportation in general to where they live and where the job is?
I think a little both, speaking for
Oh, you're frozen. Am I frozen?
No.
Okay. We'll come back to Bonnie once she unfreezes. So other people have had struggles with transportation as well.
Yes. So I know for at least for the Rochester area, RTS access during COVID way slowed down how quickly they approve people for and that's for non-Rochester people. That's the more accommodated public transportation. And then not only they slowed it down, but they also keep making the service area smaller and smaller and smaller. And I believe they're about to make it smaller again. So then that's less transportation available for people, and if their family is working, it gives them very limited availability. And as we know, employers like more open availability.
Right.
Say,
Well-
speaking to that more specifically, inter-county transportation is particularly difficult. Going from Monroe to Ontario, going from Wayne to Ontario, and any combination thereof. And outside of a 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., Holly's talking about working later hours or working weekends. Well, that's what we're expecting of our interns, but how are they going to get to where they're going?
That makes sense.
Another thing I would say for just looking at like the years that you just had up, the 20 to 21 and the 21 to 22, is that I don't know for other programs, but I know for us, like the just coming out of COVID had low enrollment. So then, we had 4 people who left in 2022, and 2 of them got jobs immediately. And then why am I drawing a blank on where one of them is right now? And like the other 2 were not, oh no, we only had 3 graduate. So that's why I'm drawing a blank. So we only had 3. 2 got jobs. 1 was not ready because of some other issues. But then our percentage is low because it's only 3 people. So then, it's only 66% or whatever, because it's 3 people. And so if other people had low enrollment, if you had 4 people and 2 got a job, that's 50%. I don't think that's the only issue, but it could be playing into like when we're just looking at the stats.
Sure, I agree. I think a lot of programs had, I think we can look at that, Marilee, and now I'm thinking about it, but I agree with you that the lower the enrollment, I mean, obviously that the statistics, changed, that changes drastically. You're right.
Yeah.
So
that's, I would be interested in like the percentage instead of by program, but maybe like the whole state, this is how many people were enrolled and this is how many people got jobs.
I don't think I can pull a report like that, but I think
yeah.
Ellen can. So, I mean, but again, I think you're right. As a state being enrolled, that could make a difference for sure.
Instead of it being like 50%, but that's 2 people.
Right. Yep.
We can take a peek at that. And Bonnie, you were frozen before, but you said that there were some issues too with like transportation training.
I think it was just, it coincides. So the transportation training to get from one spot to the next, which is the same as them getting transportation to jobs and back. So knowing the access is limited to begin with impacts the training. So we can do the training piece, but not from their home to the work site, just because there's no buses available from there.
Right. Okay.
What about the SCAT buses? Can you get in touch and get the kids to register for the SCAT buses? They're like the town buses that'll help for disabled, and usually I'm gonna say vested, sorry I'm old, Access VR can assist with that. Or even calling, and sometimes you have like local community areas that'll have these local town buses to be able to pull people. Like we're in a larger city, we're in New Rochelle, so we have 100% employment rate right now for the last 4 or 5 years. And again, we're pushing and pushing, but we have so many stores that are local that the kids can walk to, that it's easier for them to be able to maintain. And we're starting those components earlier. So we have a prerequisite to go into Project Search that's here in the building. So the kids are getting very used to being out in the community, working, being able to get from point A to point B to their jobs, even testing them to make sure we have like adults following them. I feel like we're stalkers sometimes, but it's just, trying to just make sure that they're protected and they know how to go and be able to do that. But if you call like the local towns, a lot of times they'll have SCAT buses. I think that's what they call it in my town, but where they'll pick the kid up, the kid has to call, register, and make sure that they set up the time for them to go, but they could set it up for a month at a time.
Is that the same thing as paratransit?
Yeah, it's the same.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's like, so in Rochester, I think that's like the RTS access that I was saying is limiting their service area more and more and taking a very, very long time to approve
Oh,
people these days.
Yeah, because the problem is the bus drivers, right? There's a shortage statewide, so that's a big problem on top of the teacher shortage and, you know, who's getting certified, so.
You know, back to talking about recruitment, are you guys all struggling with recruitment, or is that?
So I can speak on ours like we just did. I think recruitment has been lessened, and we're trying to do that. So we just did a transition night for
Oh, she's freezing.
Um,
Gosh darn it.
we'll come back to Bonnie when she pops back on. Anybody else, you know, is that a struggle for you guys, recruitment?
Our big issue with recruitment is that it's holding the kids back a year from graduation, and that our district hasn't given us a decision as to whether they're going to let them walk with still not needing a credit. And the kids don't want to go and stay an extra year if they can't walk with their cohort. That's a big issue we're having.
So the school's not letting them walk?
They haven't made a decision in 2 years.
I'm sorry, that stinks. That really does.
We are a very new program, so I mean, I think that's part of our issue with recruitment. And I really want to get to the timeline that is expected for these things, but we're not there yet. So we weren't even able to do our skills assessment day until July for the year that we wanted to start in September. And fortunately, it all did end up working. And we got 7 interns to go through that skills assessment, and 7 interns that started. But we were really sweating it because we had scheduled it earlier than that, and we didn't have the interns. I mean, we had like 1 or 2 applicants and just had to delay things. So our publicity from our first graduation got us 1 intern because a mom called and said, I really want this for my kid. So that's just, recruitment is a area that we want to focus on and be able to, but I think as we are more visible and get to be known, I think it's going to be easier. In fact, we just created a Facebook page. It hasn't like officially launched yet. We haven't announced it, but we got permission from our agency to do a project search Facebook page for our program site specifically.
Oh, great.
And just all kinds of different ways like that we're trying to get the word out so that hopefully this isn't so much of an issue.
Right. Well, and I know even with older programs, there seems to be a need for refresh. So I think recruitment is one of those ongoing things that kind of has to be revisited on a regular basis annually, just because especially even in large environments or older programs that have existed for a while, there's a lot of turnover, and then people aren't as familiar with Project Search anymore. So there's a lot of value to keep it going too. But good job on your efforts to really hit it hard as you're kind of making yourself known, and I'm sure that will bring dividends. Anything else you guys can think of that would really help, or how can we help you in moving some of these numbers forward? Is there anything you feel like you're needing topics wise as we look at doing presentations for each of the quarterly meetings, or in the February in-person meetings?
I did have a question when you were talking about having somebody on a wait list. And so if an intern dropped, you could pull somebody else in. how late in the year could you actually do that? I feel like you would.
Yeah, so it would only be, how do I want to say this? They would have to start before the beginning of the second internship.
I'll see. That's even
So
that's
like
longer
if
than
you,
I thought. Okay.
yeah, well, so you need 2 internships to complete project search, right?
Okay.
But you want them to have that 3 weeks of orientation. So you would have to be able to kind of bring them in, you know, those 3 weeks before the beginning of the next internship so that they would have equal amount of time. And then I mean, the other thing is to consider is the staffing. Will you have people that will be able to do kind of all of that work to get that person
A lot.
up to speed? Yeah. So, I mean, I think can it happen? Sure. But I think that you have to be thoughtful about it. And will it work for your program? I mean, those are definitely suggestions, and or the wait list, if people drop out over the summer, they don't show up, then that's easy, then you're bringing them in kind of right then and there. So, just things to think about to have, or, I mean, a lot of people will enroll more. So if you know that 6 is your number, you enroll 8 because you know that something's going to happen. So.
Well, and I guess that's the other thing that I don't know, that I've been thinking about in terms of when you are selecting intern candidates. The intern that we had that dropped before our orientation was even done, I was not in agreement with accepting him, but the rest of my team was like, I want to give it a shot with him. It was way too much for him to handle. And again, we all knew it was going to be a long shot. So it's kind of like, how do you know which way to go?
I think if you have, so, I mean, how do I want to say this? I think if you have that instance, right? And I think every one of us who I'm looking at your pictures, you can think of a year or an intern that was like, oh boy, we're doing it, right? It's the roll of the dice. But if you have somebody else, you have that person. So maybe you that's the time to over enroll. That if you think, you know what, I don't think this person's going to really make it through, but I do know that this person can do it. Then, if your number is 6, then maybe you accept 7, right? So that you have that ability to be flexible so that if that person drops out. I mean, I think that's the best way to do it, but applicants than maybe spots that you have. When you're in the situation, and I think this is what happens over and over again, is that you're in a situation where you don't have that many applicants, and so you take what you get and you roll the dice. You do whatever you can to help that individual, but sometimes, I mean, I think sometimes what you know. And so either Faith, you stand firm and say, I don't think this is the right thing. Because the other thing is, I mean, I think every program has the right to say to somebody, not now, apply again next year. And then, as a CRP, can you enroll them in a different program that would help prepare them for project search,
And we did that for the person who withdrew. We did. And that's working out better.
And I think that builds your own pipeline as well, right? So if you have the ability to do something like that, or if you feel that somebody isn't, and giving them kind of the instruction on, hey, these are the places where we think they're going to struggle, right? So how can you build that over the course of the next year so that you can apply again? I think oftentimes people think it's a one application and done, and it doesn't have to be that way at all.
Thank you.
Eleanor had asked what a New York State regional meeting is. So we meet quarterly, all of us, over Zoom. And then in February last year, we had 2 in-person meetings. One was down in Manhattan area, and we're also looking at having one in Canandaigua again. So that's still the plan for this year, is to come together in person and be able to share information and brainstorm and give you some good technical support. So that's what I'm referring to when I mentioned the regional meetings. I have also another meeting that I need to hop off to, but thank you so much for joining us today. And I will send out this recording to you if your other teammates need to see it, or if somebody wasn't able to come today. And I'll also resend the survey. So the survey is really meant to gather some information about how you all are being funded, to look at some of the topics you think would be really helpful for your program. And then also looking at the meeting dates. In February, there's a lot of spring break, or, you know, that spring break happening. So we're just trying to figure out who's most available when. So thank you again. It was so good to see everybody. And I'm so glad that we have a smaller venue where we can actually have good conversation. So thanks for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Feel free to reach out anytime. We're here for you.
Hi.
Take care, everybody. Holly, thanks again.
Got it.
Bye, everybody.